That's
Okay.
okay.
Sorry, we are
Kicked
live, and I
on.
just had a cat that just kicked on the
Oh.
desk, and it's the cat that'll destroy things up here. So I'll keep an eye on her. The other two should be fine. Anyways, we are live with Todd Elliott. Thanks for joining us. We're super excited in Grimerica to have you here. Darren got your book in the mail the other day, and he was like showing me how awesome it is. The hardcover, The Cunning Farmer, Agrarian Magical Practices, Mythology, and Folklore. There it is right there. Yeah. So we are super excited. It sounds like an amazing feat and what you're doing on your farm and stuff. Really looking forward to chatting with you. So welcome.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah,
thanks for having me
this
on.
will be
Appreciate it.
super
I really
exciting.
am
It's
honored to
something
be
that
here and glad
I
to be
think
talking
about
with you
quite a
guys.
bit, but it's so unavailable for me to put it all together. So I'm gonna dig into your book and read it. I moved into a small town in the middle of the prairies, and so it's just a lot quieter. And I keep thinking about sort of magical practices in the earth and watching the sun and where it goes and stuff like that. I kind of want to build like an addition to my house that gives me a bit more of a view. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of Randall's work a little bit too, that he talks about sort of geomancy and setting up the sacred center in a property. So I want to ask you some questions about that. But I mean, it's really, it's really interesting how you put all these different traditions together into this. So I guess let's start with that. I mean, like
Yeah.
why put it all together in a book like that? How have you been doing it yourself? Like like um Greer says in your he wrote the forward to your book. Finally, an Earth magic book written by someone who actually touches Earth. So you're obviously deep into it.
Yeah, it was really kind of him to write the forward. That was so great, and to be so kind. Well, let's
I
see.
guess why? Like,
What was the first question?
How
Was
long have you been planning them to make all this?
why
into
so
a book?
eclectic? Oh God. Well, I mean, I had the genesis of the idea when I was in my early 20s, and I'm 53 now, so it's been 30 years kind of in the making. I started writing notes on a book that I might want to write one day when I was, like I said, 30 years ago in my early 20s. Um, so, just kind of keeping ideas in the back of my head about what I wanted to write about. I knew it was going to be about agriculture and the sacred somehow, and, agricultural magic, things like that. But I really started writing it 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. Started working on the manuscript, and just it all came together. It's really like you had mentioned that it was really eclectic. That I draw from a lot of different traditions, and that's because I try to meet the esoteric traditions where they are. Um, I think I model my practice on the cunning folk of the 17th century. I just that's where I got the word the cunning farmer, and those were like sort of rural or artisan or agricultural magic practitioners who they'd be astrologers. They would do a little high magic, angel magic. They do divination, try to find out where if your neighbor lost his cow, they might go to the cunning man to figure out who stole him or where he was or where she was or whatever. They would do folk magic, earth magic. They would do a little bit of mediumship and talking to the spirits of the dead and the spirits of the land. So that's really where I draw my
Is that from the
inspiration
Appalachians
from. A
specifically,
really
or is
eclectic
that
background.
from all over?
No, I really got into reading Owen Davies. What's that book called? Popular Magic,
Right.
and he focuses on the British Isles. But yeah, the cunning folk thing is huge, and I don't think they call themselves that in Appalachia, but they call themselves, it's like Granny Magic or Appalachian witchcraft or stuff like that. Is a very similar path. Yeah, I live just a little bit west of the Appalachians
So what would
in
be
northern
some of the
Kentucky
stuff
near the
you put
Ohio
in,
River.
like you put in practice over the years that you've noticed really working that you would sort of write in your book? Is there some main practices that might have made a difference?
Yeah, I try to do lots of petitions and lots of offerings to nature spirits and to nature deities and things like that. I go out to the I go out to certain sacred spots on my farm, and I'll leave out, I'll leave out some cornmeal or some tobacco or some beer or some wine or something like that for the spirits, and I find that very, very helpful, very also very meaningful, just as a personal spiritual practice. I try to celebrate the turnings of the year. We do a little ritual for the beginning of our planting season at different points in the season for harvests and the summer solstice and the equinoxes and things like that. I practice astrological magic, which is where I find a time when the planets and the moon and the stars are all aligned to make talismans to help our personal life here and also our agricultural endeavors.
Does one sort of come first? Like, did you get into the magic side of things first, or did you get into the farmers thing, or how did those two come together? Because I mean, I guess the ancients probably took that sort of stuff for granted that we don't even really think about anymore.
Yeah, I talk about in the book, agriculture has always been tied to magic until recently. It was something you wouldn't want to just put your seeds in the ground without making sure the gods and the spirits were ready to help you out, because there are so many things that can go wrong with a planting. I mean, there's so many factors. There's the weather, of course, and the seasons and the insects and the animals, and all kinds of things can go wrong with a crop. So you want to make sure you have everything working in your favor. But on a personal level, I have always been a nature lover. I've always been, especially since I was a child, I was obsessed with getting out to the woods and getting out to the fields, and whenever I could, get it down to a creek and catching, crawdads and snakes and turtles and bugs and butterflies. I was at elementary school. I was infamous for running around the playground with a butterfly net rather than playing football like the other kids, which can you imagine probably didn't make me that popular. But I gotta be me, so that's what I did. And then as I got older, I moved out of the city as soon as I could. I grew up in Philadelphia, which is a great place to grow up, but I couldn't wait to get out of the city. My friends and I went camping in the mountains whenever we could, and then as soon as we could, we moved down to Kentucky, which is a long story how we got here. And I was practicing magic probably from my late teens. Discovered it, like everybody, like a lot of other people did in the late '80s in the occult section of the mall bookstore. My friends and I got every book that they had there on Wicca or ceremonial magic, and just started practicing that. And I got a little into it more into it than my other friends did, and I kept it up when they left it behind. And so when I moved out to the country, it kind of became what I did out,
sources of ceremonial
out here too. Oh God, I mean, everybody read Aleister Crowley and Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic were some of the big ones. Magic and Theory and Practice. I still have them all on my bookshelf behind me. So things like that. It was mostly, but also Wicca. I was into,
The Golden Dawn.
a couple different books on Wicca were pretty informative to me. Golden Dawn, definitely, that was Modern Magic. Donald Michael Craig introduced me to that. I've never been a member of any magical fraternity, especially when I moved out to the country where there's nobody out here doing that kind of thing. It's kind of isolating. So I'm basically a solitary practitioner. Sometimes my family joins me for stuff, but
how much?
But we're pretty much on our own out here.
Completely lost with with modern sort of factory farming and everything we're doing over here now. That doesn't probably seem like there's any magic involved, unless it's maybe involved on a level that I'm not noticing at. But it really seems like we've kind of gotten away from that completely.
No. Yeah, they've definitely gotten away from that completely in the modern world.
How much of that spills over into we've got this huge problem with all the food, right? I was just talking to someone who went to Israel and couldn't believe how good the carrots were, and then I was talking to someone else who had an apple from some other place and couldn't believe how good it was. And then you look at some of the numbers, and it's like all of the nutrient density in our vegetables and our food and our crops have gone down to almost zero, and you're eating apples that are mostly water and oranges that are mostly water, and it's all just sort of getting stuffed up. So I was wondering how much of that has to do with the chemicals and how much of that can just be, could be like a lack of intention or magic or anything or something like that.
Well, I'm sure the intention and magic contributes to that, but a lot of it's just growing things in nutrient poor soil. I mean, if you're growing things, I went to California and visited a big vegetable farm and bought some sweet corn, some watermelons, and some strawberries, and they were the worst things I've ever eaten. They had no flavor. They were completely watery. They were grown in sand, whereas we grow in soil. They were grown with chemical fertilizers, whereas we use compost. And we use, we actually have dirt here. So that's a lot of it right there. But I really do believe that the plants and the crops respond to the intention. They respond to the love and the care you put into it. I have a chapter on corn and grain growing practices. I'm sure if you live in the prairie in Canada, you probably live in grain country. And you know that they plant those fields with giant, massive planters with no ceremony, no love, no care. And if you contrast that with the way indigenous people in that part of the world grow their crops, with ceremonies for every step of the process, it's kind of sad to think, for me as being a plant person, to think about the little corn plants just being unloved and uncared for. Nobody sings to them, nobody celebrates them, nobody celebrates their harvest. I mean, you might take your check to the bank and be happy that you can pay off a massive debt that you've incurred against the planting, but there's no community celebration, no love in it anymore. And I'm sure you can taste that. We raise vegetables mostly here, and we put a lot of love and intention into them. And our customers say that their kids finally eat vegetables again. When they, kids are famously not into vegetables, and families will join our CSA and our kids just love it, and they never love vegetables.
The interesting part is there's so much science now
you can
around
definitely taste it,
and the water, and like even just your physiology in a state of gratitude. There's all these things that like your state of being affects physical things, and your intention with water, like the Marisudo Emoto, all those things. But I mean, I never really thought of that as far as like farming and plants too. But I'm assuming it would make a big difference.
Yeah, it does to me. I mean, first of all, it's a very spiritually meaningful practice for me to try to put intention and love into the plants personally, to walk around the fields and try to broadcast love and good vibes and healing energy to the plants, and to do ceremonies to help the plants grow. It's a spirituality and a religion almost for me. But second of all, the plants definitely respond to it. I mean, everybody's familiar with The Secret Life of Plants, where you can, where they said you could actually measure the plants that had been exposed to good intentions and praised, and the plants that had been, threatened or scared or whatever. So that was also, that kind of thinking is a big influence on me as well, when I heard of that years ago.
Wrote the foreword. Of course, we had him on, must have been almost 10 years ago now. We probably do have another show with him and see where he's at these days. But when we had him on, there was a lot of talk about cataclysm. Maybe not cataclysm. No, I don't think he was coming at it from a cataclysm, more than his take was more just, it's all temporary and it's all collapsing. I don't know if he's still there. I assume that he is. So I wonder how much of the book, like, did you take any of that into account, that some people might have to grow some shit real soon, and it'd be best if they had some tricks?
On a personal level, as a farmer and as a homesteader, we're always ready for emergencies or contingencies. It's just the way you think. We try to have a full winter's firewood. We try to have extra fuel and seeds and things like that on hand for anything that happens, and that's always in the back of my mind. But I don't talk about it too much in the book. I do have a chapter on plant medicine, where I talk about how it might be necessary to relearn some of the skills of plant medicine that we lost in that some of this stuff, agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and plant medicine are necessary skills in a non-industrial world, and that we might have to go back to that one day. And I don't know where John Michael Greer is with that now, but I imagine he's still following all that.
Is there any sort of history of? I mean, I know I was just watching something last night about. Man, I'm gonna mess up the years. I want to say it was like maybe 535, 536, and 542. That were these sort of years of lost crops. There was a bunch of cultures around the world that said the sun was blacked out. Seems like there was a bunch of starvation that crept in. So are those sort of was there any sort of I think we're blaming the sun or volcanoes or something like that now, but I guess from your point or from this sort of point of view, it could be all sorts of different things that can start to affect crops on a sort of a metaphysical level.
Well, we've definitely seen a few years where it's been drier than normal in a row. We've had a couple dry years, and I am also an astrologer, and I have studied eclipses. And if you read William Lilly, who was a 17th century English astrologer, he wrote a treatise on eclipses and talked about how they can affect crops, and especially if they're in a fire sign. And a few years ago here in the central United States, we had a total lunar eclipse. We had two of them. We had one in 2017 and one in 2024. And right in the area where the area of totality was, along the path of totality, there was a severe drought in the central United States, including our farm, that year. So it is interesting how cosmic events can affect life on Earth, and I do follow that in my astrological work. And as a farmer, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. If the climate tries to go south due to sort of cataclysmic shifts, you just kind of have to try to roll with it. As far as climate change goes, I do hold out some hope or some faith that the nature spirits and the gods will be kind to us because we remember them. But yeah, I think we're just as vulnerable as anyone else.
Why they measured followed the solar and lunar activity so much. Like when I was reading, Randall's work where he would talk about building like a school and he'd have a insertion of the gnomon pole, the establishment of the cardinal directions, the horizontal calendar and the astronomical lines, and the sacred center where if there's water underneath it by dowsing, all that stuff. But I'm assuming that you would want to watch, if you didn't have the modern tools that we have, you'd be watching almost daily or whatever to make sure that the sun is on path and the moon is on path. Because if something changed, like you would know, from history that this is the way the sun goes, and there's a pole here that shows. And if it ever goes off track, you'd be like, okay, like we got to prepare for something,
I mean, it seems like agriculture and some sort of astronomy naturally go together, and that as soon as a culture develops agriculture, they start to develop astronomy. And one reason is because they have all of a sudden enough food to have astronomers, basically, because astronomers they probably don't produce much food, but because they have to be studying and measuring the sky and staying up late and watching the stars, you need a priesthood or something like that, an intellectual class. So that's one reason. But another reason is because you need to know when you need to have a calendar. And you can't have, if you don't have paper, you can't develop a calendar. Well, even if you do have paper, you can't develop a calendar without celestial observation over generations and generations. So astronomy and astrology always generally some sort of astrology follow agriculture, because you need to know, if we plant corn on May 1st, for instance, maize on May 1st every year, well, we need to know when May 1st is. And you can't know when May 1st is without a solar calendar. You can use, and a lunar calendar is the first calendar most people developed, because you can just, the moon is obvious. You can view the lunar cycle. Yeah, you can count the number. You can count the moons, and a lot of cultures have names for the moon. The hunter's moon and the harvest moon and all that. But eventually, because the lunar cycle doesn't correspond to the solar cycle exactly, you get your lunar calendar off. So some years will have 12 moons and some years will have 13 moons, and you could have your planting date 2 weeks too early, which would be disastrous. You'd waste precious seed, or 2 weeks too late, and then the bugs and the weeds might get a jump on your crops. So you have to have some pretty precise measurement. That's why all over the world they have these solar lunar observatories like Stonehenge, or even here in the United States, not too far where I live, we have the Hopewell Earthworks in Ohio, because that's essential. If you're gonna have crops, if you're gonna know where you are in the wheel of the year, you have to have that stuff. And as far as cataclysm goes, I imagine some people were, if you look into Hamlet's Mill,
we've read the book.
There's I don't know if you're familiar with Hamlet's Mill. Yeah, okay. Well, supposedly they believe that people had folk memory of the entire cycle of the Platonic year, the Great Year, where the pole shift goes around the 12 signs of the zodiac, and with that, when that happens, you have climate change, and you have a slight change in the declination of the sun, which causes uneven heating across the globe and climate change. And then you have the Malinowski cycles, I believe they're called. I don't know a whole lot about it, but yeah, ancient people would have figured that stuff out.
Did you notice
Milankovitch, yes.
Did you notice any difference between the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, equatorial? Like, it seems to me like some of these practices would be a lot more maybe sacred when you get into the northern hemispheres and into the southern hemispheres, where you've got real consequences.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question too.
At the equator, you kind of got, I'm sure I don't live at the equator. I'm sure there are some other rules, and maybe the equator is not the best example. Maybe it's like a little ways off of the equator where you get into like the South American rain. You just get to these parts of the world that are overflowing with food and all these things that you've got to assume agriculture would almost be taken for granted to a certain extent.
Well, I mostly concentrate on the northern hemisphere because that's where I live, in the middle latitudes. But I've been to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico several times, and I'm really interested in the Mayan culture as well. And I know that their farming cycle is very seasonal. Like, although they don't have the massive temperature fluctuations, they do have a wet season and a dry season, and things have to be done at the right time. The maize has to be planted. They do what they call swidden agriculture, or slash and burn agriculture, where they will clear a section of jungle. That has to be done at the right time, because that has to correspond with the beginning of the dry season, so they can burn the forest, and then the planting has to be done so it catches the rain, and the harvesting has to be done before the rain season really sets in. So there's a whole timing to it, even though they live closer to the equator and the seasons aren't so extreme. The seasonality is different. It's more to do with the water cycle, and the people there, the traditional people, famously did develop a pretty precise calendrical system, and they have the what's it called, they have two calendars. I want to say the long count. They have a 365 day agricultural year, and then they have the long count and the short count. Yeah, gosh, I'm forgetting all my facts. So I wasn't ready for this, fellas. I've written a couple things about this, but because that's based on a cycle of 20 days and 18. It's based on a different cycle. It doesn't exactly correspond to the solar year, their sacred calendar. I want to say it's the Baktun. God dang it! Right. I can't do it without. Yeah. Well, that's one of the words. That's one of the time periods. But I'm blanking on the name of. They had several different calendars, but one was a solar calendar that had to be readjusted by actually observing the stars and observing the sun. So some of the sites in the Yucatan, there's a place called Zibilchaltun, which is in the north of the Yucatan, where they have a temple that lines up with the spring equinox that probably would have been used to recalibrate the calendar to the solar cycle for planting the sacred corn.
So it depends on where you're at, depending on how you would use your astronomical measurements and stuff. So like for you, you mentioned May 1st, which also, I guess, would be the same in, the old traditions in the UK and stuff, Maypole, May Day, all that kind of stuff. Is that because it's right between the equinox and the solstice, or like why May 1st?
No, I was just throwing that out there, but yeah, that is about the time we like to plant maize around here, corn around here. Yeah, definitely, and it is when the soil is warm enough. I mean, a lot of agricultural crops, it's just when the soil's warm enough, when the weather's warm enough, when things have settled down enough. We're not going to get a late frost. You know, a lot of our crops are really tender, and people use, what is that called? Phenology, where you look for signs in nature that it's warm enough to do certain activities. The famous thing about oak leaves being as big as squirrels' ears, you can plant your corn then.
No, but it makes sense because
have you ever heard that before?
You'd be looking for that time that's before the
You'd be looking at the signs
before the equinox and after the solstice, right? I mean, it would be kind of yeah.
Or after the equinox and before the solstice, definitely. Because the solstice would be too late, you know. Yeah, and the equinox would be too early, so you want to find that sweet spot in there. Yeah, and a lot of our practices are like traditional pagan practices come from Northern Europe.
How does Christianity fit in with all this, especially in the States and the farmers and the agriculture and Christianity? I mean, can this fit in from a Christian perspective as well? I mean, do we have like a weird view of Christianity where in old Christianity would have been able to follow this a little bit more, but now that it's modern, or do you have any views about that at all?
That's a good question. Yeah, I probably have a few views about that. Well, so a lot of traditional Christian groups use the liturgical calendar, like the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church have what they call liturgical calendar, which really is based on the planting year. If you happen to look at it, Christmas occurs around the winter solstice. Easter occurs around the spring equinox. I mean, that's not a mistake. Most of the work is done, or most of the crops are planted by Pentecost. Most of the major festivals happen in sort of the agricultural off season. I don't know how much if you guys have noticed that, but
between Thanksgiving in Canada and the States. I mean, ours. If you sort of look at you mentioned May 1st. Nobody in Alberta is planting corn on May 1st. I mean, they seem to know sometimes. Last year they planted early. The farmers they were following something because last year normally here it's like mid-May. End May before the seed really starts going in the ground. But last year we had an early spring. We had more water than we've had in a decade. Looks like we're going to have the same thing this year. But those farmers were out there earlier than usual. They were out there last week of April, first week of May. But you mentioned Thanksgiving, and your Thanksgiving is like 6 weeks later than ours. And I would argue that your harvest season is probably 6 weeks later.
Oh, that's
than
interesting
mine as well. Ours is October.
Yeah, that's probably true. Well, it's funny.
Second Monday in October, I think. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. No, as far as your farmers go, I have a book by a British folklorist named George Ewart Evans. I got a couple books of his. He's pretty cool. He went around his area in England and interviewed old timers about agricultural practices back in the middle of the 20th century. So he had these old guys that could remember the 19th century. And one of those old guys told him that when they got ready to plant the barley, because barley's a big thing there, they would go out there and they'd like get the soil prepared and they'd like pull their pants down and put their butt down on the ground. And if it was too cold, they wouldn't plant their barley. But if it was warm enough that their butt didn't get cold, then they'd go out there and plant the barley. So maybe that's what your guys are doing up there in Canada. They're just checking the soil to see how warm it is. Hope they might be using a thermometer. They might be doing it the old-fashioned way. It was a real banger year for Alberta.
That's weird.
Farmers. I don't know about Saskatchewan, but for Alberta farmers last year was a real good year. The one thing that screwed a bunch of them is they hung on. Everyone was hanging on because it was warm. The weather was good. And I think that most of them caught it before the frost came in. They know what they're doing, but we had a couple of real bad hailstorms come through and completely level. Like you can see the line of where the storm came through and just destroyed sort of everything in its path, which sucks for those farmers because they're getting insurance on a regular year, not on a bumper year. But we've it's interesting to see you say it's been dry down there, because we've been wetter up here for the last, say, 16 or 18 months than it has been in over a decade.
Oh yeah, we've had a dry couple of years. Of course, we got a couple inches of rain this week, which is great. But your farmers, just not to speculate, but I imagine they were trying to leave it out in the field to dry as long as they could before they combine it and put it in the bin. I think it costs more money to dry it in the bin than it does to dry it in the field.
We've got this new thing where we've got farmers spraying glyphosate on wheat right before they cut it down, so that it dries out faster. That seems to be kind of. We have some farmer buddies, the Snake Bros, down in Texas, and I remember we had them on the show, and Graham and I were telling about this glyphosate problem. We're like, the farmers are spraying this shit on the stuff to get it to, I forget the word, but to basically dry out quicker.
Desiccate?
Desiccate, because then there's less of a risk of them losing this crop because of, if it only takes 3 days instead of 2 weeks or whatever the numbers are, it's just, it's safer for them. So we had them on the show, and they're like, nah, man, that doesn't happen. It says right on the package not to do that. And I was like, all right, well, go talk to some farmers around there and report back. And to their credit,
that's horrible.
To their credit,
that's horrible. They talked
to, and they were like, man,
go ahead.
Every single farmer we talked to is doing exactly what you just said.
Wow, even down there.
Even down there, I know they're doing it here, because you can start to notice that glypho in the air come right around harvest season, and you see all the planes everywhere, right? You see the crop dusters, you see they're all out there spraying that shit right before they cut it down.
Yeah, that's got to be bad for the people that eat it, for sure. I mean, glyphosate
bread problems are coming from.
I think you're absolutely right. I've heard that before. I try to not eat any wheat products that aren't organic anyway.
On us, right? Bread's been sort of the staple that's kept alive for a couple thousand years, and then
I know,
but people can't eat it.
I know, and a lot of people can't eat it. I have a kind of a hilly place, and we've raised wheat here before, and I really love to raise wheat. I raised it half an acre or something like that. I have an ancient combine from 1950 model, Alice Chalmers combine that does like a 5-foot swath. It's pretty cool, but I love to have it here. It's just such a beautiful and ancient crop to raise, and to talk about feeling like you're participating in a timeless activity. Just to sow it and to harvest it,
the world in the end,
it's pretty amazing.
Because here they're not growing any of that, man. Like where I am, I'm in Wheatland County, so where I drive out, like on my way to go fishing, I'll drive by fields that are 10 miles by 10 fucking miles of nothing but wheat, as far as you can see in the horizon, and every single direction is wheat. But none of it isn't.
That's messed up.
Shit. There's none of it. I mean, maybe there is. Maybe the Hutterites aren't doing it, but
even if they tried, it's gonna get everywhere anyways, right? Even the people that certify organic are getting shit sprayed from all over the place.
I pulled up the Mayan calendar when you talked about it on my Chat GPT. It says the back tune was 144,000 days, a Katun 7,200 days. A tune 360 days, a unal 20 days, and a kin is 1 day.
They had two different calendars. They had a sacred calendar and a civic calendar. I was trying to remember the names of them. The two different calendars.
One's the Hob.
Then the Hob. That's it. That's the civic calendar. That's the 365-day calendar.
1820 day month. And then they have Zolkin, sacred calendar. And
sulking. Those are the two words I couldn't remember, Hob and sulking. But the Hob, interestingly, they knew that it was actually that the year is actually 365 and 1/4 days. So that 1/4 will mess you up over a long period of time. That 1/4 day will get things really off. So what they would do is they would celebrate the beginning of the Hob year 6 hours later each year to account for that. So even though it was a 365-day calendar, they would just move the official celebration back 6 hours. 6 hours.
Yeah.
So they would catch that quarter day.
Than ours.
Yeah, it works pretty good. So they wouldn't have to have a leap day like we do.
Have a leap year every 4 years, unless it's on a zero, or unless it's on a zero. But if the zero is on a triple zero, then it still counts. Like there's this whole like weird system behind it. The 360-day thing is interesting though, because we've had a few people on. We do shows on ancient history and all that stuff, and this 360-day year keeps coming up. Did you come across anything like that? Because we've also got this weird procession thing going on at the same time, and you wonder if that could affect how many days of the year they were going to at some point. Because how do you make up 5 days a year if you're doing a 360-day year?
Well, the Egyptians had 5 days that didn't count, 5 intercalary days they were called, and it took them a while to figure out that quarter day thing too. So their calendar got off pretty quickly. Over thousands of years, that 5 days really get your agriculture off kilter. The Egyptians often actually used the stars for most of their more precise measurements. But even that, because like you said, the precession of the equinoxes, you lose the stars move backwards 1 degree every 72 years or something like that. The fixed stars against the position of the sun. Yeah, that's the wobble of the Earth's axis that moves the pole star. So yeah, I have run 360 was a number in Mesopotamia. Of course, they all knew, they were all good enough astronomers that they knew that wasn't exactly right, but it's a sacred number. It's the number of degrees in a circle to this day, and it's the number of degrees in the zodiac. It's a perfect sacred number for all sorts of people, but it doesn't quite fit the Earth's year. Almost, but not quite. So they had to add those days that don't count.
It's got the magic and the stuff in it. Is it also sort of like a practical guidebook to someone for, like, is this something someone should have in their pantry when they're planting seeds and stuff like that?
I've got prayers in there that people can read for planting seeds. I've got practices in there. Yeah, it's got some basic practices and some suggestions for further reading and study. I'm really trying to communicate a worldview of resacralizing agriculture, and that's my major contribution. But I have all kinds of suggestions, hints, and places you can start in there. It's a big book. It's 500 pages, so there's something for everybody in there. And you asked me about Christianity a while ago, and I don't know if I got to answer you, because I do take that up in there. I feel like a lot of our Western esoteric tradition was carried through Christianity in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and I think a lot of people who identify as pagans want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of all that Christian esotericism that we find in the books of magic from the Middle Ages. And I think that's a mistake, because that's what we're dealing with. That's our esoteric tradition. That's the real thing right there. And to throw it out and try to reconstruct something as if it never happened is sort of dishonest. If people want to do that, I support them. And people have all their own relationships with the divine and the sacred and their own background, and a lot of people have had horrible experiences with Christianity, and I can certainly understand that. But in my own work, I don't entirely throw it out, but I do honor the pagan practices and the more earth-based practices as well.
That's kind of why I was asking, because I appreciate the modern resurgence into Christ, not so much the church, but into Christ, and some of the ancient practices that would fit in with kind of more of the esoteric stuff, like the book and all that. So it's I think that's a really interesting view.
Yeah, I try to. I mean, I feel like I don't identify as a Christian, and although I was for a long time, and I was raised an Episcopalian, which is, you guys probably know what that is, being Canadians. I was raised that way, and I wasn't traumatized by my religious background or anything like that. So And I feel my heart goes out to those who were, and I totally understand. So, but I do talk about angels. I do talk about the divine. I do, I consider myself a Hermeticist and a Neoplatonist, and that's kind of my new home tradition. And so I come at the divine and angels from that direction rather than from a Christian direction. But it's part of our tradition, and I honor it and respect it.
Speaking of Platonism, I was going to ask you, I have a really weird question, off the ball question, but have you ever played around with sacred geometry as far as like dodecahedrons at all, and using those as a tool of focus, or even putting them in the farm or in the gardens or anything like that?
No, that's a great idea. I did build a geodesic dome one time.
You had
Yeah. You could buy these little frames. I don't know what happened to it, but you could buy these little frames, and you could mount 2x4s to it, and it would make a 20-sided. What is it? Is that that's a dodecahedron? Yeah, it would make a dodecahedron. You could put a icosahedron. Yeah.
Electroculture. I mean, we've done some shows about that. Have you played around with that at all?
No, I would love to though. I would love to play around with that. It's a little expensive to get the kits unless you build them yourselves, and I would love to get a field broadcaster. I'd love to get started on that too. That's really cool. I've been hearing about that for years. That was
doing an experiment with dodecahedron, like visualizing a dodecahedron on these plants, and they grew differently. It was pretty interesting, and because it also has when you go back to some of the ancient literature on dodecahedrons, it's got crazy mythology around it. Yeah, that's
a 12-sided one.
Pentagon on each side.
Yeah,
and it's talks about it being the structure of the universe and the most powerful symbol or shape and all this stuff. It's pretty interesting.
That's cool. I mean, I know all those from dice, and of course those are the Platonic D&D dice, and of course those are the Platonic solids too. I always thought that was cool that, that when I read about the Platonic solids, that those are the building blocks of the universe in Plato. Those are the shapes the elements come together to form, and in D&D, those are the things you roll to make everything happen. So I always thought that was a neat way the game lined up with esoteric philosophy.
Yeah, I love that part of it. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is about Gordon White's book, Animistic. It reminds me a little bit about that too. It was a pretty amazing story and book. So I guess animism, would that be sort of like an underlying philosophy of the way you look at your farm? And
definitely. And I love Gordon White's books. I haven't read Animistic in a while, but as far as my philosophy goes, that's definitely a huge part of it. I mean, I think we live in a living cosmos. I think the stars are intelligent. The plants, I think there's communication on all levels across everything is sort of telepathically connected, psychically connected. I think that's how this stuff works. I think that's how astrology works. I think it's how magic works. I think it's how spirituality functions. I think my work is to try to connect us back to the living cosmos.
I love it. Yeah.
As well.
It's weird because the same thing has sort of happened with the meat industry, right? We used to hunt our meat and be thankful for it, and there was sort of a reverence to it, where now it's just sort of pretending we're friends with animals until we kill them, and pretty horrible environment for the most part. You can see where
pretty horrible.
We sort of lost that entire relationship with food.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we raise some animals here, and we try to give them a good life. But there are some people that are trying to bring the sacred back into butchering too. I think that's really great. I'm going to talk to a guy next week down in Virginia that does that. I'm interested to hear more about what he does. The way we treat animals, and around here hunting's a huge thing, and deer hunting, and it's my relationship with the white-tailed deer is kind of complicated. They're one of my biggest agricultural pests, but hunting them is really restricted. I'm not allowed to do it except for a couple weeks out of the year, and of course that's not when they're causing trouble. Some of my cropland is on leased land, and other people have the hunting rights, and I'm not allowed to get rid of the pests that are eating my crops. So
Do you hunt
it's a
other
little
stuff at all,
difficult.
or-
But
Yeah, because if it was your land, you're allowed to. Because I was watching something, I think it was Jeff Foxworthy, maybe his place. He's got some sort of farm someplace. He's doing something, and he was saying he has to kill, I think 160 deer a year. He has to cull, otherwise they'll take over the place. So he's got a whole operation set up where he's like killing them, butchering them, and donating
Wow.
them all.
oh, he's allowed to do that. Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I have occasionally killed deer during hunting season, but it's not really my thing. I have freezers full of beef, and my family aren't great eaters of venison, so it would be me, and I can only eat so much. But yeah, I rely on my neighbors to do most of the hunting, which I think they could probably do a bit more. I wish they could do more. I wish they were allowed to do more. It's really restricted here because they want to keep it. They wanted to keep it fun during the season. Well, you asked me about animism, and I wrote this thing up the other day, which I liked so much that I put it on my notes app. If you don't mind me reading to you, I said, in the West, our animist cosmology was shattered long ago, bit by bit, by many historical forces, chiefly by the adoption of what we may call disenchanted modes of perception and epistemology. These were imposed by violence on our ancestors and later by them after those modes were internalized. What remained was carefully hidden within the esoteric traditions that have come down to us from ancient times. Together with practices judiciously and reverently learned from modern traditional peoples, the First Nations of the world, these practices can help us, the spiritual orphans and vagabonds of history, to find our way back to a relationship with the spirits of place and with nature as a whole. So that's kind of what I think my work is about. And I think the animistic traditions of our ancestors, like I said in the quote, were hidden within our esoteric practices, within our magic, basically. The idea that there's communication with spirits of the land and of the winds and of the trees and of the waters and of the cosmos, of the stars, is possible, and that things happen when you communicate with those forces. That forms the background of our esoteric traditions, and that is basically, from what I understand, animism, of a sense.
Yeah, I like it. Is there anything else in the book that you think we should cover? Any other main chapters, main parts about it? Or even your Substack as well?
Well, I do have a Substack. I publish a blog. I try to write astrological forecasts about once a month. I also try to do something on folk magic or mythology or nature spirits or something like that also a couple times a month. Folks can check me out at the Cunning Farmer at substack.com. I have a website that we're trying to get online in the next couple weeks, which is thecunningfarmer.com. Folks can look me up there. The book is available from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the publisher Intertraditions International. And it's due to be released everywhere on March 17th. So hopefully by the time this comes out. I don't know, is there anything else you guys wanted me to cover? It's a big book.
On March 21st?
March 20th, when Mercury goes direct again, or on the equinox. Yeah, they got me on St. Patrick's Day, which is funny because I have a whole chapter on like the serpent in mythology and in magic, which is funny because he famously chased the serpents out of Ireland, which there weren't really any serpents in Ireland anyway. So, which is a metaphor for his converting the pagans, because the serpent has always been a big symbol for pagan cultures, earth-based cultures, for a very long time. So yeah, I have a chapter on the symbolism of the serpent because I think it's important.
Because we're going to Serpent Mound for the solstice this year.
Oh, you guys, I live 2 hours from the Serpent Mound. The Serpent Mound is fantastic. Have you looked at the second chapter of my book? Talks about the Hopewell and the Adena people. That's awesome. A big interest of mine. Yeah, the symbol of the serpent is in the book, and also the second chapter 2 is about the Serpent Mound and the Hopewell mounds and Adena mounds. I feel like one of the major things for me to be connected with the spirits of places, to be connected with the people who have lived on your land before you, and for my place, that's the Adena culture and the Hopewell culture. We're as I said, yeah, there you go, the Serpent Mound. I would love to see it on the solstice. Of course, I'm busy harvesting garlic. You guys should come swing down to the farm and stop by our garlic harvest on the solstice and come see us. That'd be awesome.
A couple hours away. That I think we're there from the. I got to do a presentation on the Sunday, the 21st, which I think is the solstice. So that'll be interesting. And then I'm interviewing the guy there. I keep forgetting his name, Jeffrey, the guy that runs the place. So we'll be doing our event, our Contact at the Cabin event, at the exact same time as the Serpent Mound Festival is going on. So we'll be there for the solstice. But can you sort of let us know what you think they went to all that trouble for to make that giant snake? I mean, does that have something to do with the harvest?
Well, that was, most archaeologists now believe that was built by the Adena culture in about 5 to 200 BC, maybe in stages. And the Adena people might not have had maize. They were a little early. The Hopewell probably did, although I just read in a book called The Mound Builders that they found some corn cobs at an Adena site in Ohio. Anyway, yeah, I think it had to do with. I follow the work of William Romaine, who is an archaeologist that measures the celestial alignments of the Hopewell and Adena sites, and that one, well, of course, the summer solstice sunset is directly over the head of the serpent. So that's what people are gathered there to watch the sun go down over the head. And you know how he's eating us? He looks like he's eating an egg. It goes down right over the egg. And also the coils of the serpent track the moon, the positions of the moon during its 19-year lunar standstill cycle, which is something you have to do if you want to predict eclipses. And the sun swallowing an egg is pretty good symbolism for the eclipse. In fact, in modern astrology, in traditional astrology, we talk about the dragon's head and the dragon's tail being the nodal points where the moon's orbit crosses the Earth's crosses the ecliptic. The moon's path crosses the path of the sun and the other stars, because the moon's orbit, as seen from Earth, is slightly to the north for part of its cycle and slightly to the south of the ecliptic. And the points where it crosses are the nodes. And they're visualized, as I said, as the head and tail of a serpent. And those are where the eclipses can occur. So people have symbolized eclipses as either the sun or the moon being swallowed by a serpent or being hit by its tail, depending on whether it's the south node or the north node. So it's really interesting how the serpent symbolism lines up with the eclipses and the solar and the lunar cycle. So yeah, I think that's what they were doing there. It's a fascinating site. It's beautiful. It's and while you're up there, you have to see Newark, Ohio. You have to go to Chillicothe. I mean, if you got a couple days and you're in the area, those places are about an hour and a half or 2 hours from Serpent Mound as well. Newark is is the site of the largest earthworks in North America, and I was just there a couple weeks ago, and it is fantastic. There's the Great Circle is a 30-acre earthen enclosure that is almost perfectly circular, and it's 1,000 feet across, and it was dug with bone shovels and woven baskets, and about 2,000 years ago by the Hopewell culture.
Brad was showing me the outline of where it looks like there's
the Serpent Mound's in a big crater, definitely. Yeah, the Serpent Mound's in a meteor impact site, and there's brecciated limestone there, like you find in the Yucatan. And then the other thing in Newark, which ties into the solar and lunar cycle, is the Newark octagon, and the circle. There's an octagonal earthwork and a circular earthwork right next to it. The circular earthwork is 50 acres, and the octagon is a little bit smaller. But the octagon has breaks in the earthworks where the moon rise at different points in the lunar cycle happens. So it's correlated to the 19-year lunar cycle like Serpent Mound is. So for some reason, they were making these ceremonial structures to observe the moonrise and the solstice at different
Same with Chimney Rock.
at different times.
I think Chimney Rock down in Colorado is doing the same thing. Is made to track that 19-year cycle of the moon.
Oh yeah, and there's medicine wheels out west in different places. I don't know too much about them. People all over the world were clued into this stuff, and were measuring it because it was so important to know where you were in the wheel of the year. I also think it's scientific curiosity. You know, that's the only way you would know. At some point, people are figured this stuff is changing. They figured out that we're sitting on a planet moving through space, and everything else is moving through space at different rates. And sometime it dawned on some really intelligent people in all cultures worldwide that this was going on, and they got curious and wanted to know more about it. So besides the practical or the esoteric reasons to track it, there's also just like, what is going on here?
Have you come across? I got another weird question for you. In all your research and your magic and esotericism, have you come across any significance with the 3 days where the sun stops at the winter solstice and a new moon happening at the same time?
Yeah, that's part of your 19-year lunar standstill cycle. That happens once every 19 years, where you'll have a new moon corresponding with the winter solstice, or at any point. And so that's that 19-year lunar solar cycle.
I didn't know that.
So interestingly enough, a couple years ago, we had a full moon on the summer solstice. I mean, everybody had that, but I could tell the moon went down in the same place the sun went down, and the sun rose. It was wild. The moon rose in the same place the sun rose in the morning. It was pretty that's the northernmost point of the cycle, and then the winter solstice would be the southernmost point in the cycle. So those are the two extremes.
Interesting. Do you know of any like magical significance to that, or any kind of ceremonial thing? Or because I did all this research on the 3 day. There's 3 days is referenced in all these ancient books, like a lot of the Bibles and a lot of the ancient texts. It always talk about 3 days, and part of me, there's a bunch of different theories why it references that, but the winter solstice is one of them, where the sun just stops for 3 days. And it also talks about the moon, I wondered if that meant anything in magic at all, or
well, it would be the beginning of a new cycle.
Yeah.
And it would be a moon in Capricorn, if you're talking about the winter solstice, the new moon in Capricorn. As far as magic goes, I'm not sure of any particular magical significance to it. I'd like to give you a better answer.
No, that's fine. Yeah. I should look at it from an astrological point of view and start. You can start.
Yeah, it's definitely. The nodal cycle is very important in astrology, in natal astrology, and in all kinds of astrology. You know, it's where that means if the 19-year nodal, there's an 18 point. They're all really close to 19 years. There's the Saros cycle, which is used to predict eclipses. There's the Metonic cycle, which is 18.6 years, which is used to align a lunar and a solar calendar. And then there's the nodal cycle, and they're all really close. I could pull out a book and tell you they're all really close together. So on a personal level, on an astrological level, you will have a nodal return every 19 years, which marks a different phases of your life. You know, like whatever's happening to you now is similar to the themes that were happening. You'll have eclipses in your astrological chart this year where you had them in your astrological chart 19 years ago. So events that happen to you now are rhyming with events that happened to you 19 years ago. You'll see similar themes come up again. So there is an astrological significance to that cycle. And where you have astrology, you also have magic.
I think something else that would be worth talking about in your book is, you weave in like the Kabbalah, Taoist principles, alchemy, shamanism, European folk, grimoire tech, all this stuff. Like, how did you make it respectful and coherent instead of like making it like this new age smoothie type thing. And maybe that's worth talking about, all the different things you have referenced in this material.
Well, I really try to be judicious and respectful of all the cultures that I've talked about. I try to let's see. I try to acknowledge when I have an outsider's perspective, and there's definitely a lot of traditions that I talk about in there that I have an outsider's perspective, but I try to stick within the Western esoteric tradition mostly, but I do talk about the cultures who have lived on the land that I live on before I was here, before we were here, my culture was here. So I try to be respectful with that too. I mean, that's definitely a part of the story of this place, and you can't have a relationship with the spirits of place without having a relationship with the people who've lived on your space before. And since I am, for better or for worse, of European ancestry, that means that I'm a different culture than the people who lived here for 20,000 years before. But I got to talk about it. You know, it's important to talk about it. It's important to acknowledge that their contribution and their presence here. We were talking about the Edina Mounds, and most of them in my area were destroyed by settlers, which is horrible. But I want to try to remember them in my work.
For sure. Is there anything that surprised you as far as how well it translated to actual dirt farming?
What do you mean
like
exactly?
Any practice that when you're putting the book together, you realize like how well it fits with farming that surprised you, you know, even though you've been studying this for decades?
Well, a whole lot of magic is tied to the Wheel of the Year. I mean, in neo-paganism, there's that 8th festival cycle with the solstices, the equinoxes, and the cross quarter points. Of course, that was invented in the 20th century, and it fused, but it still fits really well with the farming and planting cycle. It's strange. I mean, it's no mistake, because they were fusing the Gerald Gardner and those people who invented that festival cycle. They were fusing the viewpoints of two different sets of agricultural people. So it's no wonder that the Celts and sort of the maybe the more Germanic peoples, and it's no wonder that it works, because both of those were agricultural people. So that's one way it fits, and then even the Golden Dawn celebrated the equinoxes and the solstices, and of course neo-pagan Druidism as well celebrates it's all about the Wheel of the Year. So, and that's what farming's all about as well. And tropical astrology, it fits with the Wheel of the Year too. So I'm just trying to bring it together. It seems like it might be a hodgepodge to bring astrology and magic and farming all together, but it's all about the Wheels of the Year. It's all about the 4 quarters. It's all about the 4 directions. It's all about the 4 elements. It's a cosmology, and I try to talk about the living in the center of the spiritual cosmos a lot in this book. It's the number one thing I'm trying to communicate.
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. I really like the book. I like that it's a hardcover. It's big. It's easy to read. There's a lot of real good pictures in it. It's very well thought out. It was interesting you mentioned the corn at Serpent Mound, because the Mohawks in Canada have been growing corn and squash and beans for like 1,500 or 2,000 years. Yeah, definitely. Which come up.
Yeah,
and
and
it shows those trade routes or something going on all the way from Guatemala or wherever up to here.
Yeah, people think the Hopewell culture probably got a hold of maize, and then the Mississippian culture, who was here after them around the, I'm gonna throw out a couple dates, maybe like AD 900 to whenever the European epidemics came through. So for about 600 years, we're a massive corn growing culture, and I'm sure there was a lot of trade with Mexico, a lot of cultural interchange. If you look at Cahokia in Illinois, there's pyramids made out of earth, a lot like you see in Mexico, made out of stone. The people built with what they could. So I look at artists' reconstructions of Cahokia in Illinois, which is about 6 hours from here, and that was a corn farming culture. And I kind of see I've been to Teotihuacan in Mexico, and I believe it was a Toltec city. Don't quote me on that. I think it was Toltec, and I see pictures of Cahokia, and it really reminds me of Teotihuacan. I've been to the Mayan, a bunch of different Mayan sites, and I can see a lot of similarities between those places and places in North America. And I think what they have in common is maize culture and a mythology around that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's interesting because corn's another one of those ones that used to, maize, everyone's eating this stuff, and now they're saying it's useless to us, basically, all this modern corn.
Yeah, I grow heritage corn here on the farm and try to make cornmeal with it. It's really amazing stuff. Tastes great. Tastes like a far cry from what you buy at the store. I don't really even like to buy cornbread mix from the store. It's junk.
What else do you grow?
I grow mostly vegetables, all kinds of vegetables: potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, garlic, cabbages, tomatoes, peppers, chilies,
We have a question
all
in the
kinds of
chat.
stuff. Bean.
Asked if your main garlic is soft or hard neck.
It's hardneck.
What's the difference?
I grow music. Hardneck sends up a little shoot that you have to pluck off, and it sends up a little flower stalk in May, and you have to pluck those off so the bulb gets bigger. And it's more adapted to cold climates because we get pretty cold here. In fact, our variety of music would probably do well where you all are. Originally the seed stock came from Canada.
Interesting. Before we start to wrap up, Todd, is there anything in the book that we didn't get to? Is there any questions we should ask that we didn't?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure there's some stuff we didn't get to. It's a pretty comprehensive book. We talk about plant medicines, entheogens, underworld spirits, nature spirits, astrological magic, astrology, theurgy, angel magic, all kinds of cool stuff. Weather magic. We could probably talk for hours if you.
What's the easiest thing to grow? If someone's like just getting into, maybe they want to start growing some stuff. My wife's been talking about it for a while. What is sort of an easy thing to grow in the Northern Hemisphere? What's a good starter thing that's sort of easy to grow, properly, not just throw it in the ground and forget about it? What's sort of an easy entry level that grows well and is an easy practice to do at the same time with it?
Well, you guys are pretty far up north, so how do tomatoes do where you guys live?
They do all right for a few months.
Yeah, well, tomatoes are pretty foolproof. Anybody can grow a tomato. Potatoes are pretty foolproof too. That's a good thing to get started with.
Good. Potatoes, yeah.
I thought I was reading something that the tomatoes were turning on us.
What do you mean?
They were starting to change something in their genetic makeup that was making it harder for us to digest. Which seems weird because
Oh no.
if it wasn't for us, those tomatoes probably be fucked by now. I mean, they owe us one too.
I don't know. Make sure you do everything organic. Use organic, use compost instead of fertilizer. Don't spray them with bad stuff. They'll probably try to treat your soil okay, and everything's going to be more digestible. Your plants are going to be happier, and your body's going to be happier with you eating them.
Excellent. Todd Elliott, where can people get the book? Where can you mentioned your Substack. Can you give us all those URLs again?
Sure. It's my Substack is the Cunning Farmer at cunningfarmer.substack.com. And then my website is thecunningfarmer.com. And then you can get the book at Inner Traditions International, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you can get books. I encourage people to order it from an independent bookstore. You might have to place the order with them, pre-order it. But pre-orders are available right now. People are actually getting the book right now if they order directly from Inner Traditions. You don't have to wait 2 weeks until it comes out.
Okay, that's good to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you going to do audio at all, or audio?
I've spoken to the company about doing audio. I love audiobooks. I work on the tractor a lot, and I put on some earphones and just listen to an audiobook. I would love to do an audiobook for it. I hope they agree to that. They'd be really great.
Yeah.
Hey, if they don't, let us know, because we have the Inner Traditions owes us some favors actually, so that might be something.
Yeah, I appreciate them setting me up with you guys.
We've done a few audiobooks for them and just gave them to them because we messed up something and recorded. So we've given them some audiobooks, so we might be able.
You mean you guys have read the book out loud?
Yeah.
Yeah, and gave them the files, for free.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you guys will read it for me.
Yeah, I would do it. For sure. I'd love to. Yeah.
He's narrated over 200 now, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That'd be great. We should talk to them about that. And then you get to read it good and slowly and soak it all in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm reading The Lord of the Rings to my little boy right now.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
And there's something about reading a book out loud that you get the detail so much more than when you read it in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't.
You read more slowly.
You can't skip along like you normally do.
You gotta really take it all in. You gotta.
No, I'm bad to speed read too.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, we get a lot of books sent here, and this one really stood out in the box. It was, by far the nicest book we've gotten in a while. So, looks great. It's well done. Encourage everyone to go pick that up, and maybe we'll see what we can get that out on audio for you. But Todd Elliott, this has been fantastic. We appreciate you coming on the show.
All right, thank you, Darren, Graham. It was nice to meet you guys, and good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks.
You too.
Take care.
That's it.
I don't know what to do now because I haven't done this yet. So.
Let's stop live somewhere. This is our first time on Riverside.
So anyway, that was a chat with Todd Elliott, the Cunning Farmer. Big thanks, Todd, for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening, supporting. If you do, we couldn't do the show without our supporters. Grimerica.ca/support. If you want to sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation, check out our other podcast, Grimerica Outlawed.ca. Contact at thecabin.com if you want to come to Serpent Mount or one of our other trips we've got coming on. And adultbrain.ca for those 200 plus audiobooks we mentioned that Graham read. Other than that, love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
All right.